Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2013, the holiday edition of the Professor Messer A-Plus Study Group. So nice of you to join us today. If you are joining us live in watching on our YouTube stream, you can find us at professormesser.com/live. And I mentioned the Professor Messer website because I am watching the live study group chat at the bottom of that page. If you're watching over on the YouTube side, it has its own chat. Unfortunately, I just can't put that many things up on my screen at one time. So if you go to that particular chat, I'll be able to follow along and ask questions, and you'll be able to ask questions of me. Of course, this is also a live call-in show, so you're welcome to go to that professormesser.com/live, where I have all of the phone numbers available, and you can call in at our guest call in at 347-989-8745. And if you're on Skype, you can Skype for free at 855-235-4742. Again, all of those numbers are at the bottom of professormesser.com/live. We already have people calling in, so we'll be getting to you in just a bit. There is so much to go through. You folks sent me so many different questions, but for those of you who may not have seen this before, this is something we do every month where you send me your questions. This gives me a chance to hear from you and the things that you need to know more about, and of course gives us a chance to learn some things before walking into your final exam or your series of exams for A+. Since this is the A+ certification, you of course have to get through 2 of those. If you want to be able to follow us throughout the month, of course, we do this study group once a month, but of course you can always see everything that I'm doing throughout the month at professormesser.com/YouTube and professormesser.com/Twitter. Feel free to subscribe and join us and like those videos. It is remarkable how important that tends to be. I've also got some free bonuses for you. So if you're ready to take your test, don't pay full price for your test. You can buy a voucher that's discounted from professormesser.com/vouchers. And I realize I have a voucher code there until the end of the calendar year, and I do expect to have an updated voucher code. We'll see. Crossing my fingers. That is thanks to our friends at GTS Learning who sponsor that voucher code. So that is something I'm hoping to get from them as the end of the year gets closer. So let's also keep in mind that by watching this, maybe you already have your A+ certification, you will be able to get credit for your continuing education credits. And there's a big conversation going on this week about continuing education. And I think I've deciphered it for pretty much everyone. But there is these credits that you can accumulate so that you can renew your certification after 3 years. And as we go through this study group today, I'm going to give you a couple of code words that you can send to me, and I'll then send you back a certification saying, yep, you watched the whole thing. So that should get you at least a couple of credits. You can find out more about that at certification.comptia.org/get-certified/stay-certified-ASPX. They certainly don't make that very easy from a link perspective, but you can find it very easily if you look for continuing education in CompTIA. Google that. You'll find it just fine. Well, we go through this, as I mentioned, every month, and we went through a lot last month. I won't be repeating myself, so if you want to learn about how does DisplayPort compare with HDMI, you can always do that. What are the differences between IP classes? What's the difference between a shadow copy and a backup? Those are good things to know. How soon should you take the 802 exam if you've already taken the 801, or vice versa? You don't have to take them in order, numerical order. You can take them in whatever order you would like. How long does it take to study for the exam? What math and formulas do we need to know? I answered that question last month. And what would the next step be after A+ certification? We will be talking about all new topics this month, but you can always go to the A+ video index on the Professor Messer website, or simply go to freeaplus.com, freeaplus.com, and it will take you to that video index page. At the very bottom are all of those. So that's one of the things that becomes very useful when you're going through that. There's been a lot going on at Professor Messer over the last month. I now have, of course, all of my 801 and 802 videos available for free on the internet. But if you wanted to download those, I have a downloadable version that you can purchase. So you can have MP3 files, and you can take the videos with you. You can put them on your mobile devices. You can be offline and be able to watch all of them. There is also transcripts and closed captioning that I do for all of those. And this last month, I added some new products to our overwhelming list of videos. Some people said, I need something to really help me prior to finally going in and taking the exam. So I went through every single video and I created these study guides based on the content that was in the videos so that you can have now a list of the key points from every single video. And I went and I interviewed people who have taken the exam and I said, what topics were most important to you? That you have to be very careful about not giving information about what exactly was on the exam. But from there, I was able to discern what I should really put into these study groups. And everything from the 801 is in the 801 study guide, from the 802 is in the 802 study guide. I've got test tips that I've put in there. If you're ready to walk into your exam, this is a very good opportunity to go in and see all of those things. And I've made them very, very economical. So if you wanted to buy this and have it available, it's $10 for each one of these. And one of the things that's nice about this is this goes directly back to the Professor Messer website. Our hosting costs obviously are astronomical. We're now up over $1,000 a month just to host this because we have to have multiple servers and load balancers, and there is a reverse proxy that's used to bring everybody in to handle loads across the world. It's a relatively complex setup. I should really just have a video on how the Professor Messer website is set up. But at the end of the day, it costs money. So this is a great way if you like the videos, and some people want to be able to contribute back to the website. Every single penny of this goes directly back into doing that. So, if you want to learn more about that, you can find it at professormesser.com/A+SG, A+ Study Guide. Of course, there are links from the pull down on the website. A lot of great information there. I'm getting great feedback from it. If there are things you would love to see on the study guide, we've made some tweaks and some changes. So I keep revising it, and it's downloadable. It's a PDF file. It's not copy protected. You can put it on all of your devices. So wherever you happen to be, if you're on a bus, if you're on a train, if you're on a plane, you can pull it up and have a look at it on your phone, on your mobile device, on your tablet, on your computer. It doesn't matter to me. Put it on everything so you can always have that to reference. Well, I like to have this as a more interactive view of what's going on. We're going to go to our calls in just a moment, but I want to ask you a question first. And that question is, how long have you been studying for your A+ certification? And I'm going to have you go to pull up a QR code reader. I need to reset my statistics from last time. There we go. Go over to vot.rs and go to, that's the wrong number. That is the wrong number. Wrong number. Don't go to that number. Watch how we do this in real time. This is live television, people. 619742. And don't do this. Don't go like that. And we'll pull up our QR code reader on the next one. There you go. That's kind of sad looking without the QR code reader there. But go to vot.rs 619742. I think that old one, it may redirect over there, but I know that this one is correct. How long you've been studying for A+ certification? And if you do that on your mobile device, pop open a new window and go to vot.rs. You can tell me how long you've been studying for your A+ certification. This gives me a chance. I might as well, I'll give you a QR code. Let's do this. I can pop up on my screen this QR code reader. So there, if you've ever been trying to figure out what am I going to do with this QR scanner that I've got on my mobile device, here you go. Now you've got a QR code that you can pop up and go directly to this page. So you can tell me how long you've been working on this. This would be a really good option to give feedback to me, because I like to be able to take these study groups and really mold them to exactly the things that are going to be important to you. This month we got, I think, questions across the board. There were questions about networking. I got some about operating systems. There were some about command line. Usually we do these study group questions, and I ask you to give me a question when you register, and the question goes into this big pool for everybody who has signed up. And usually I get a lot of repeats, and this is, I don't know, maybe it's the holiday season. There were not a lot of repeats on this one. So I thought that was kind of a nice change, and I got some new topics to go through. So that works there as well. If you go to the Professor Messer website /live, you'll be able to see that. Let's have a look at what people are answering here. Notice I get real-time feedback from you, so I can see who's voting on what. We're going to have some pop quiz questions later on in the study group, and so this will be very useful to test your knowledge on how much you know about some of these topics on the A+ certification. I'll also remind you we will be taking your live calls. The phone number is at the bottom of that video screen at professormesser.com/live. And I've got also the free Skype dial-in as well. And you can see we've got a nice mix. It looks like a lot of people are just getting started with the A+ certification. Less than a month, 1 to 3, and 3 to 6 months. So we're really looking at 6 months and earlier. Some of us have been doing this for a while, all the way up to more than a year. So we've got a nice mix of different things that we're working on, that we're trying to figure out. And I see this sort of a range. The holidays are here. A lot of people like to now sit down and study and study and study. There are a lot of new classes that start in January, so we get a whole new group of folks coming through that are learning about the A+ certification. We're going to be going through a lot more questions as we go through the study group, but this should give you a pretty good idea of some of the things that we are looking at and trying to get you to see and learn as we go through the study group. There is quite a bit that has now been updated on the A+. I still get people talking about the older version, but it's important as you're going through your study for the A+ to look at the structure of the A+ certification. The 801 doesn't have a lot of hands-on. A lot of people will send me questions this month that said, how can I get a lot of lab time for the 801 exam? You'll notice the 801 exam goes through PC hardware, networking, laptops, printers, and operational procedures. There's not a lot of hands-on associated with that, or at least command line setting up of an operating system. That's because all the operating systems are in the 802 exam. So there is a bit of a mix here. There's a lot of the 801 is understanding hardware, understanding what the different interfaces look like on the back of the computer, understanding how the memory is configured. Those things are, of course, very important, but there's no keyboard time associated with that. It's more of understanding the architecture of the computer, understanding the hardware of the machine. All of the operating system pieces tend to occur in the next one, in the 802 exam. So a lot of people will think about that. We only have 2 exams now. With the 700 series that just got retired, CompTIA went to 2 exams, and these 2 exams can be taken in any order at any time. You just have to make sure you take the 801 and the 802. You could take the 802 and the 801. You could reverse those. You don't have any particular time limit between those two. You could take the 801, wait 2 years, and take the 802, as long as those 2 exams are still available to take, because eventually CompTIA will retire these exams and replace them with, I don't know, the 901 and 902, or whatever the next one is going to be. And so you can't mix and match. You have to make sure that if you're planning to take your A+ certification, you take the 801 and the 802 when they're offered. If they go away and you haven't taken one, you have to start all over again, and we don't want that to happen either. So another good example of things you need to think about. I got a lot of questions that came in this month. I will remind you, we have some dial-in lines available. I do have lines that are still open for those who are looking at doing that. Get your Skype up and running. Test with the nice Skype lady, and you can see if those things are doing exactly what you would like to do as well. Now I'm going to bring up my pop quiz. I have another pop quiz for you. No answering in the chat room. This is something you should answer all to yourself. It looks like I have the numbers correct on this one. So I'm going to ask you a pop quiz question. The question is, what task does the laser printer developing process perform? There's this developing process as part of doing laser printing. Printing, obviously, a big part of the CompTIA exams, not just how the printers work, but also how the printers are troubleshot, how you go through and understand problems with the printers and how they are working. So that's another thing. And the study guides that I have go through troubleshooting processes, for instance. Check this, check this, check this, check this. And then one of the nice things I was able to do with my study guides is I was able to rewrite some things to make it easier to read. You know, coming from slides, I didn't just copy off the slides and stick them in the study guides. I had to really rewrite in English. So really works that way. But so the question is, what task does the laser printing developing process perform? And the options are, now that we have that QR code up for a bit, I'll move you over. The options are, we build the entire page in memory. We can remove the excess toner. We add toner to the charged area of the imaging drum. We apply heat and pressure. Or is this developing process writing the image with the laser beams? So now we are trying to figure out the developing. And this is the one where laser printing process itself is pretty complex. There's a number of steps, and we will, as you can imagine, we're about to go through what all those steps are. So I'm really asking you is, what are we doing with the developing process? How do we get to that? No answering in the chat room, remember? Yes, some of you, if you haven't got to laser printers in your studies, just take a guess at it. If you're going to develop something, which one of these would be the most straightforward of developing? Which one of these sounds like a developing? Kind of goes back to the days of developing photographs in that way. It's one of those things that there's a process or something that happens to develop that image. In this case, it's an image on a piece of paper. So that's one of the things that becomes important when you start working in laser printers and starting to understand how to fix them, how to repair them. You're looking at a piece of output from a laser printer and trying to figure out, why does this output not look properly? You need to understand the whole process so that you can determine, based on what you're seeing, where along that process are things breaking down, are things not working properly. And that's where we start to see this in the laser printing process. That's why we have to memorize that process. A lot of you are always mention that there's a lot to memorize in the A+ certification. You're absolutely correct. The exams have so much information on them. This is another one of those that you do have to memorize, but there is a logic to it. So it does help if you know the process that it goes through. You can piece it out in your mind. It makes some sense when you start working with it. Well, we've got a lot of people that have responded to this, 47 respondents. Let's see what folks have said with what task does the laser printing developing process perform. So 26 of you said adds toner to the charged areas of the imaging drum. And if we were phoning a friend, we would have gotten this one right. That is the correct answer. 6 of you say build the entire page in memory. 8 said apply heat and pressure. 12 say write the image with the laser beam. And in this particular, nobody said remove excess toner. That one didn't fool anybody at all. That's the cleaning process. So that is one of those that we get associated with that. There is quite a bit associated with this. And one of the questions that I had come in was specific to the laser printing process. We're always looking for an easier way to do things. And the question was, is there a mnemonic? Jesse asks, is there some type of trick that we can use to help memorize this laser printing process? And I don't know of a mnemonic. Maybe one of you have a really good mnemonic of how to do this. It's more of a task of understanding how it works throughout the entire process on the laser printer. And I think once you step through it, to go through and understand how it works, it becomes easier to memorize. So let's step through this. We've got a laser printer. We've sent it some text to be able to take that data and print it on a sheet of paper. So we're going to first process the image. One of the things that's unique to laser printers, this is different if you're dealing with thermal printers, don't work this way. Inkjet printers don't work this way. Dot matrix or impact printers don't work this way. The way that laser printers work is once they start printing, they can't stop. They can't print half the page, wait a little bit, and then print the other half of the page. There's a lot of moving parts. It's a complete cycle. It's a very, very specific, at a minimum, people are printing like 300 dots per inch. It's very precise. So you can't stop in the middle of it and then keep going. The entire page prints at one time and comes all the way through the laser printer. So one of the things you'll notice if you're sending a laser printer a very complex image, it's a lot of graphics. It's a diagram of some blueprints. It's a graphical image. It has to think a little bit. It's building the image in the memory of the laser printer. That's why sometimes you'll see a laser printer run out of memory. And it's running out of memory because as it was building this complex image, it finally got to a point where it had no more memory to build the image with. And most likely you were printing a graphic. When you're printing out text pages, they come out quick. No problem there. There's really nothing to build. It sticks some text on the page and it prints it out. But if you're someone who prints a lot of graphics, you'll notice these laser printers take a bit of time and they build the entire image in their mind, in their memory, and then they start the laser printing process. So this very first step is the processing part. So if your laser printer presented a message on the screen that said, I'm out of memory, it's at this phase. It never even got a chance to print anything. Or if it does, some laser printers will run out of memory and then print, but only print a third of the page or half the page or however much it was able to get into its brain. And you have to end up doing laser printer memory upgrades. I've done a number of those in my time where we have to add more memory into a laser printer just so the folks in the drafting department can print their blueprints. very, very common to see that. The next phase of this is to charge the lasers. So there's this drum inside of the laser printer, and we want to be able to stick toner to this drum. So we want to charge the drum with an electrical charge because the toner is going to be charged with the opposite charge so that they can stick to each other. It's all done with static electricity effectively. And then we go through the process of going to, now that we've got this drum charged up, we're going to use a laser beam to etch the particular ions right off the face of the drum. We're really reversing those. So we'll know where things will stick with the toner, and then we develop it. We just went through this. We take the toner from the toner drum where the toner is stored, and now it sticks to those sections that we have etched out finally. Very nice to have that available so that we can then have that transference that takes place, and so that we're now able to take the toner from the drum to the paper and fuse it together. This is why the paper always comes out hot out of a laser printer, because it's very warm to be able to work with that. And that's because we have to take that toner and apply heat so that it melts onto the page, and pressure so it stays on the page. If we ever get paper out of a laser printer, it's not warm, and we move our finger on it and we can take that toner and it comes off in our finger, then we know that the fusing process is not working properly. And finally, we have to start the process all over again, and so that everything is cleaned off of the drum. And then we're able to now start that again. And in fact, the drum rotates through for a single regular sheet of paper. That drum is going through 3 or 4 times to finally get it out of the printer. There I am winding it on my screen. There, that's very technical. I'll just wound that through. So that's why if there's anything wrong with the drum, if there's a scratch on the drum, you'll notice it appears 3 or 4 times on your page because the drum has cycled through and that scratch has shown up 3 or 4 times on the piece of paper that you're using. If we wanted to see this graphically, I used my extensive skills in artistry to present this display to you. You can see this was not really my forte in school, was being able to take an image and really bring it to life. I deal with squares and circles, people. That's the way it works with. We process that data coming through. We charge the laser beam up. Then that laser is exposing that data here on the screen. And now as the drum is circling through, we take that toner and move it off to the drum, which then transfers it over to the paper, fuses it together, and spits it out for us. That is one of the things that you may be asked on your A+ certification. What part of the laser printing process takes that data, applies heat and pressure, and takes the toner and makes it permanent on the page? You have to know which one is that? It's fusing. There is another part of the exam that may ask you maybe to put these in order. You have performance-based questions on the exam these days. I mentioned the 801 exam, the 802 exam have performance-based questions now. These performance-based questions may give you a list of things and say, put them in order from beginning to end, and you have to somehow fit them together. So this is one of those ways that you can really go through and understand exactly what's going on. This becomes also important in the troubleshooting part of the exam. The troubleshooting is also going to be useful for us to know this entire process, because then we want to be able to understand where's a problem occurring. As long as we can find that data, we can find out where the problems happen to be. So I thought that was a great question that came through, and I appreciate that coming in. I like to go through printers. Printers are obviously a big part of the exam. So you may get a lot of questions on laser printers, impact printers, inkjet printers, thermal printers. Those are the 4 types you may be asked about. We don't really get dye sublimation printer, dye sub printing anymore on the exam. So if you're looking at older A+ materials, that will not be one of those. So here's another question. Do not tell us this question in the chat room. The question is, where can we find details about these Windows startup errors? And let's see if I got the numbers right on this one. I think this is one where I did. So you can use your QR code reader, or you can go to vot.rs and vote at 392143. Again, do not tell us the answer in the chat room. But the question is, where can you find details about Windows startup errors? You can find them in, is it Event Viewer, Control Panel, the Log Consolidator, System Configuration, or Device Manager? That is as one of those things that becomes a bit more of a challenge, especially when we're trying to find problems with the Windows. You get these messages that pop up and then they're gone. And it's during the startup, or perhaps you're at a user's desk and they say, I get these problems when the machine starts. Well, instead of restarting the machine, maybe the first place we go is to one of these places to see what is there. It would be nice to see that. So it's the Event Viewer, Control Panel, Log Consolidator, System Configuration, or Device Manager. This is, we flip over, we can see how many respondents we have so far. We have 21 respondents so far. I'll give you another second to vote. Okay. Event Viewer, Control Panel. This is where you'd be surprised how much information can be pulled out of your computer when you start looking in the right places, especially when you don't know what has gone on during this startup process of Windows. We've got 40 people that have responded. Let's see what our answers might be. Let's show the results. Where can you find details? I really fooled no one with this one. 42% of you, or 43 of you, not percent, but of you said Event Viewer. Now everyone's piling on. Of course we said Event Viewer. We're up to 46. There is no such thing as a log consolidator, so it was not the log consolidator. There is system configuration, which can help you troubleshoot startup problems, but it will not give you any details about the startup errors. So that one won't work for you. And Device Manager, another one that can give you a status of your hardware, but it will not, again, tell you why the hardware broke or what happened to make that hardware broke during the startup process. There's no details in there. And that was the critical word in here. Where can you find the details about Windows startup errors? And keep in mind that when you are working with these A+ exams, they are very specific about the text in the question. They aren't trying to trick you. They're not trick questions. The A+ questions are extremely straightforward. If you know your content, you can know exactly what they're trying to get out of that question when they're asking this. But Event Viewer can be extremely useful to you. And I bring this up because Mark sent in the question, is there another way to check errors in Windows 7 rather than just using the Event Viewer? Well, there's a number of places to get data out of Windows 7. The Event Viewer, though, is really one of the best places to go. And if you were going to look in your Event Viewer in Windows 7, you'll find it consolidates everything. It is all there and available for you to look at. And that's why if you're working a large environment with a lot of servers, especially Windows servers, you can consolidate everything back to some centralized logs or centralized event viewers. It becomes really useful to have that available. And I think when people are working in those with one computer, it's easy to find that. Imagine if you have 20 servers, 100 servers, 1,000 servers. You, instead of going from server to server to server, you need some way to consolidate and view those specifics. That's a great way to do it. You can view in here application information, security information. There's details about the setup of applications and the system itself. And there are different priorities associated with these errors and messages coming through. Information warning, error, critical, successful audit. There's a lot that you can really go through and work with. Let's see if I can pull up a view of this on my screen and give you a perspective. This is my Windows 7 desktop. I'm going to go to my control panel, and here's my control panel. You see it there. And the Event Viewer is an administrative tool. It's an administrative function. So I'm going to choose my administrative tools, and inside of administrative tools is the Event Viewer. The Event Viewer gives us a lot of ways to view the data. There are a lot of options available to see what's going on. The default Event Viewer has these 3 panes available. I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger so we can see exactly what's going on here. In fact, I'm going to make it even bigger to the south. Since we have some real estate on our screen, this will help a little bit. You can see the event types are here. This is, of course, over the last hour, the last 24 hours, and the last 7 days. Have I had any critical problems? I haven't. If you were sitting down at somebody's desk and they said, this machine blows up, I get a blue screen, it restarts, you're probably going to have a critical error in here. I have had some errors listed in here. One in the last hour, which was a kernel event, and I've got an NTFS problem. And in the last last 7 days, I had 3 distributed COM issues. So now I'm really getting an interesting view of what's going on. As I click on those, and it brings up this view of the world, for instance, this kernel event, I could see all of the events that I have. There's the error event. It said the Microsoft Security Client OOBE stopped due to the following error. All right, well, now I can start troubleshooting. Why did the Microsoft Security Client stop? It probably does this every time I start up my computer. And now I can get a view of that. I can view it by date and time. I can sort by the errors that are there. I can go back up and look at other errors I might have available. View all instances of that threat. The default transaction resource manager on volume O encountered a non-retriable error, could not start. These are amazing amounts of detail. This is the detail you're not going to get if you're simply looking at error codes pop up on the screen. There's an enormous amount of data in here you would never see unless you went into the event viewer. This is where you really should be gathering a lot of details, because your next step is now troubleshooting. And you may get some of those odd messages about error code 0x00000FF. Well, now I have to go Google. Now I have to figure out what that error means and where it came from. And the best way to do that is going to be in the event viewer and working through the specifics of the event viewer to understand more about why I'm seeing that particular error. Sometimes the event viewer can be more of a problem. The event viewer gives you so much information that you can get off on these tangents. So it's very useful to at least understand the base of what the user's problems are so that you can really focus your efforts. Because as you may have seen in my event viewer, I don't have this up on my screen anymore. Let's drill down on this again. In my event viewer, I had a summary of those events. I had 234 informational events in the last hour. All right, I could spend some time going through and looking through all of these. 153 just in my service control view. So that's a lot to go through and try to figure out all of those events, a total of 9,909 events. So you do want to focus your efforts when you're going through and using the event viewer so that you don't run into a situation where you're spending all of your time looking through events that don't actually have anything to do with the problem you're trying to solve. That's a pretty important piece of that. I think there's a good opportunity to also learn more about what your computer is doing if you go into the event viewer. So make sure that you at least are familiar with the event viewer. You can go through and look at events. You understand the information that it's providing to you, and you'll probably get, if you're going to get a question about the event viewer on your A+ certification, you'll probably be something about the one that I just gave you, is where can I find this detailed view of errors and messages that occur during startup? Well, that's your event viewer. Where can I get an idea after the fact, after a blue screen has occurred? Where do you go and find out more about the blue screen error? You go into the event viewer. It's going to have everything there. You don't have to wait for the blue screen to happen again. When that blue screen occurred, you had messages that were written into the event viewer. It's one of the last things that happens. So when you restart your computer, you can go back into this event viewer and see exactly how that happened. Robert in the chat room says he has 40,000 events that he could go through on his machine. Quite a few there to go through. So another good example of why it's important to understand exactly how to use the event viewer, filter things out, break through and really break down everything that might be inside of there. It's going to be really, really useful. Okay, I have another pop quiz question for you. No answering in the chat room. The question, get your QR code readers ready. I'm going to make sure that my QR codes are correct on my screen before I give it to you. I think we are correct here. And the question is, where can you view information about USB power utilization in Windows? We'll do Windows 7 for this one, but I think this applies regardless, whether it's Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7. Of course, on the A+ certification exam, the operating systems that you're expected to know about are Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7. I got a question in our list of questions sent in this month. When is Windows XP going to be dropped? I don't know, never. There's so much Windows XP that's still out there in the world that people are using. It's going to be important to know how Windows XP works for a very, 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 very long time. I would be very surprised if Windows XP got dropped. I would expect Vista would be dropped prior to XP, just based on number of desktops that might be running at this time. A lot of people said Windows 8 has been out for a while. 8.1 is out now. When should we see Windows 8 on the exam? Who knows? The CompTIA simply adds things to the exam sometimes. So it may still be the 801, 802. There may be a new edition of 801 and 802 that shows up, and you're going to want to know about the details of that exam as well. So the question specifically in this case is about USB power. And where can we view USB power utilization? The options are services, desktop gadgets, administrative tools, device manager, and power options. So go to vot.rs 676317, 676317, and you can vote yourself on where you can view the USB power utilization. Very interesting that you can make that happen with the USB power. There's a lot of details you can get out of Windows. If you've ever plugged in a lot of devices into a USB interface or a USB hub that you might have, you might get a message in Windows saying, I don't have any more power left on this to give you. This device requires more power than the USB bus can give this particular device. How can you monitor that? How can you see what's going? Windows gives you a way to see all of those things. Where can you see it? It's a really good point in the chat room. XP, the support for XP is going to go away in April of next year in 2014. It will be interesting to see how many people stop using XP at that point. I think a lot of organizations, a lot of large businesses are already in the process, if they haven't already, of making the change to Windows 7. There's still a lot of Windows XP out there. There's some organizations still running Windows 2000 out there because they have this one application. It was written for Windows 2000. That's what it runs on. It was never updated. It's sitting in the corner in the communications room, and it just runs, and we hope nothing happens to it. One of those challenges. And of course, there's, in the chat room now, I've started the conversation about how bad Vista was, but the reality was Vista was bad when it came out, but by the time the service packs came along, Vista was solid. So it just got some bad press. Ultimately, Windows 7's Vista. There's nothing that's different between Windows 7 and Vista. It's the same thing. Vista's awful. Windows 7's great. It's the same thing. Hello? It's the same operating system. Everything's the same about them. There's very little that changed. It's just Windows 7 was the bug fix. One of those odd things about it. Makes it easy to learn, though, for your A+ certification. I can learn Vista, and I pretty much know almost everything associated with 7. There are, of course, for literal you, there are changes in Windows 7. There were things that were updated. I understand. There were things that were updated in 7, but effectively it's the same OS. Look at them side by side. You almost can't even tell the difference between those two. Very remarkable. Okay, we've got 63 respondents. I've talked long enough. Blah, 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 blah. And here we have USB power utilization. 38 of you said device manager, and you'd be absolutely correct. If you want to know the status of a device, it's the device manager. There is power options, helps you with understanding how to set up power usage on your computer to be able to understand when you turn a screen off or how long you wait until your hard drive spins down, but it doesn't actually give you utilization numbers on how much of that is being used at any particular time, and certainly not on the USB ports. So that's another important part of this. Power options very useful on your laptop computers, of course, because you want to be able to save as much battery power as possible when you're mobile. Administrative tools, well, sort of. You can kind of get there based on some things that are administrative tools, but that is just a section of the control panel. That won't actually give you USB power utilization. Desktop gadgets, services, not those either. Desktop gadgets are those things you put up on your screen in Windows, the little clock that's going in the corner, or the weather of today. So it wouldn't be desktop gadgets either. There's probably, though, a desktop gadget someone wrote somewhere that was written to show USB power utilization. We don't really have desktop gadgets any longer. So it's one of those things that was a great idea, and nobody really used that much of them. So the question really came from Jenny. Jenny asked, how do you test a USB port that seems to have intermittent power? Would be useful to know more about the power that's on that USB connection. So let's go into my device manager and see what's going on. Let's see if I can find my Windows 7 screen. I literally have a virtual machine running, for those of you wondering how I'm going through all this. So there's my questions that I was asking you are in the background there. I've got just a screen here with a virtual, I'm running on a Mac OS 10 operating system. I've got a virtual Windows 7 running here. It's actually a multiple windowed Windows 7 that I have running. There's a lot that's running here. I have another window that's over on my other screen here. You can't see it because I don't have it up right now, but here's the other Windows 7 screen. So if I have something up, like I bring up a file manager, I can bring it over. There it is. So I've got a virtual multiple screens that I'm using for Windows 7 on this one. I use this to do things like build my study guides. I had lots of things going at one time. And I like to do a sanity check of the information that I'm using. So that sanity check really helped me with the Windows 7 piece. All right, back to our USB piece. I need to get my chat room back up so I can see the questions you folks are asking me. There we go. Kind of see what happens behind the screens here. This is not Parallels I'm using, although Parallels will do a similar thing. This is VirtualBox that I am using on my screen to be able to make this happen. Here's my VirtualBox console, in fact. So I've got all my virtual machines that are available here. Most of my virtual drives I've got off somewhere else, but I've got all of those listed in there, and I've just simply brought up my virtual display. Okay, we were talking about those pieces. So let's go through and look at our device manager. So I can bring up and now zoom up into this. Now in Windows 7, my device manager right here off the control panel, same thing for Windows Vista, because as I mentioned, it's the same thing. Let's go and look at all the things in the device manager. It looks very simple. If you don't have any problems with a device, you'll simply see a list of devices, and they're broken out in different views. You can change the view. This is devices by type, but you could view by connection. You can view it by resources. You can show hidden devices. There's a lot that's here to look at. Quite a few things to be able to go through. It is one of those nice parts about this exam that it really gets you into a lot of details. The exam, of course, isn't asking you how to click through things in the device manager. It's asking you how the device manager works and how important it is to use. But as you start to understand more about it, you get into using device manager. What a great place to go to start understanding how everything works on your computer. Well, we're interested in USB. Let me grab a drink here. For those of you that are watching this for credit on your CompTIA CE, the first phrase that you'll need to send me in an email by clicking the Contact Us at the top of Professor Messer is USB power. So if we look at our device manager and we go through, we've got a lot that's in our device manager. At the very bottom are USB controllers, universal serial bus controllers. And if I view that, I've got a lot of different USB controllers. I've got 2 controllers on this machine and 2 root hubs. The root hubs is where all of your power information is going to be. And if I right mouse click on that, you do have some options available. One of those options is to look at the properties of the root hub. And inside of the properties, there is a power management tab that allows you to turn on and off this particular USB hub. This is useful on a laptop, for instance, to save power. But to look at power utilization, it's the power tab. Power tab tells you on this particular hub, it's self-powered, so it's not externally powered. It's powered from the system or the USB bus itself. The total power available is 500 milliamps per port. So you can plug in as much as you want, but you may go over this. And so you need to understand how much power do each of your devices require. And as you plug them in, a good place to get this from is just connecting the device. So if there's a mouse connected, it will tell you my mouse requires 100 milliamps. And there's 7 ports available. If that's using 100 milliamps, I've got 500 available. That means I've got at least 400 more to use. So I've had configurations on my computer where I've had multiple cameras plugged into my computer, and I've had to plug them into separate USB root hubs. Even though there were a bunch of USB ports on the back of my computer, some were on one hub, some were on another. So I really had to even figure out what ports in my computer were connected to what hub. I went into my view here in the device manager, pulled up the root hub properties. As I plugged in, I could see this update and see what's there. That is exactly where you go to get all the information you're going to need about the USB power and being able to use that. I think it's whenever we start working with device drivers, we're here a lot. Us technical folks use this section a lot. because device drivers become an important part of troubleshooting. This is where you see how all of the hardware is talking to the operating system. This is where you would load new drivers. This is where you would uninstall particular topics, the particular pieces of hardware in there. This is where you can see everything. In fact, if you call tech support, one of the first things they'll ask, especially with video type problems, is, have you updated the drivers? There was someone having a problem in our chat this past month saying, I start up my computer, I see this crazy stuff on the screen. I just reloaded the operating system. And I asked, did you update the drivers? No, I haven't updated the drivers. And they ended up updating the operating system, which of course updated the drivers, and the problem went away. It was absolutely some great information to go through about those drivers. Well, there is, as I mentioned, quite a bit that you need to know about performance-based questions on the A+ exam. The performance-based questions for the 801 are really based on putting things in a list, being able to understand what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. But for the 802 exam, what you may find is that there's a lot more there that you have to do hands-on. You have to understand things about the operating system. You have to be able to go into the device manager, for instance, or work at the command line, or do other pieces associated with those. So one of the questions I often get is, I don't have Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7 all running in my lab. In fact, I don't have XP. I don't have a way to get XP. There's no way to run it on my computer, but I want to learn how to do things with Windows XP. And you can do that. The question that came in, by the way, is from Thomas. I want to make sure to give Thomas some credit there. Our folks at GTS Learning have created a live set of labs called the Freestyle Labs. And if you go to professormesser.com/freestyle labs, you can see a free trial of this. Let me just show it to you. I've got my Freestyle Labs up on my screen. Let me get it up and running here. I've got a lot on my screen for some reason. Go figure. I'll get here in a second, folks. Here we go. Okay, my Freestyle Practice Labs. I'm logged in to mine. I'm going to launch my lab series. So you can see how this works. This is like you're taking all these different operating systems, servers, network connections, all of those, and you're bringing them back into a single view where you can now work in this virtual environment, almost like setting up your own virtual labs where you have the step-by-step lab already taken care of. There's a lot of topics available. I'm going to go through a number of these. We just did one dealing with devices and other things. Maybe I'll find where. And there's an event viewer lab. So let's go into this one. So it's going to take you through the event viewer lab that you're working with. And I think I want to use their HTML5. I don't know if I have the HTML5 piece set up, but it takes you to, let's change this over to be the HTML5, and I'm going to power on this computer. So this all works in a browser, and I'm able now to start up a virtual machine, which is now going to launch Windows. In fact, it even tells you, we're going to review the event viewer. Here's the lab diagram on this side that tells us exactly how this lab is set up. And it's going to take us through an exercise step by step. And the exercises are going to bring you back to what process do you go through in working with the exercises and working with the labs to be able to solve problems with this. So it's popping up this remote desktop view. Here is the lab. So now I've got this Windows machine right on my computer. It's just opened up a new window for it. So this isn't on my machine. This is somewhere, I don't know, in the world. And it's running, and I can step through all of the exercises associated with this lab and run through everything I need to do. In the more complex labs, there are multiple machines. You can start out with routers and web servers, and you can capture packets, and you can work and understand what's happening at the network, all here in this virtual lab. Very nice to have available. There is an absolutely free trial that you can run. I think it's for an hour. And if you want to run these and have them available for a year, it's just $99. You can find out how to run those, how to get them set up, how to try your free trial. See if it's for you at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. And we thank GTS Learning for helping to support what we're doing here at Professor Messer. I think it becomes an important part if you're trying to get those hands-on performance-based questions for your 802. Well, let's move on to looking at some of the questions that you have sent me about the exam. But before we do that, got a call that's come in. So let's take the call from the 661 area code. Are you there, caller? The caller is not there. It's very quiet. Give him a second. Don't hear my caller. Are you there, caller? I'm going to put you back on hold. We'll try again. If you're calling in via Skype, make sure you try the nice Skype lady to have you come in and do that as well. And of course, you're about a minute behind when you're listening to this live, so you're not going to hear me pick up on you. You may want to listen in on the call-in line to be able to hear that as well. I'm going to do it one more time since I gave you a moment. The 661 area code. Are you there? Nope, not there. Not on it. It's very quiet too. Usually I get static or something. So there may be a muting that is going on there as well. And of course, you're welcome to call in. You'll find those call-in numbers at professormesser.com/live. The numbers are 347-989-8745, or you can Skype in toll-free 855-235-4742. Who knows if they spell something or not? I have no idea. It's one of those challenges we all have. Well, the questions you've sent me this month are about the exam itself. So one of the questions that came in, should I take the 801 and 802 exams on the same day? Should I do that? Is that a good idea? There was a question really last night in the chat room. This one came through. Jared asked this one. He sent it in our registration process. And that's a pretty good question because you have to take 2 exams to get your A+ certification. But as you go through the list of topics, there's a lot you have to know. But a lot of people will study up for both exams at the same time. And a lot of the time when you're reading through a book, the books generally take both exams and consolidate it into one book. So if you were to read through the entire book, you would effectively have all the information you would need for both exams. If you watch my videos, you'll notice my videos are broken out by 801 and 802. So you could study just the 801 and go take that exam, and then study the 802 and go take that exam. And as I mentioned, there's no time requirement between them to be able to take them. So the real question here is, though, let's say that I know the content. I know this information cold. I am ready for both of the exams. Do I take them on the same day? And the real question is how to do this in a way that makes sense for you. If you've never taken an A+ certification exam before, I don't really recommend that you do this on the same day. If you haven't taken one of these industry certification exams, I don't recommend you take them both on the same day. There is this fear of the unknown, this not knowing what you're walking into. And after you take the first exam, it's the same process every time. You walk in, there's information on the screen. We're looking at the entire piece. The candidate experience as you're taking the exam is important because you're now in this odd environment where you have to understand the process. And I think at least giving yourself a day to digest what just happened, understand the way that the questions are asked, understand how you click around the screen, just the mechanics of it is hard enough. So I think that's one of the reasons I recommend for you to at least wait a day. But if you're somebody, you've done this before, this is easy. I go through and do this all the time. Then why not? Take them both on the same day if you're comfortable with the testing experience. There is a video on the YouTube, on the tube of you. Let me flip over so you can see this. I'm on my YouTube here. I search for CompTIA candidate experience. Right here at the top, the first thing that comes up is a 15-minute and 44-second candidate experience video.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this short video.
You are welcome.
CompTIA has received questions from candidates asking, what are your exams like?
What are your exams like?
How much time do I have to complete the exam?
Yes.
Or what type of questions should I expect when taking an exam?
Well, that's exactly what I would like to know, sir. Tell me more. And they go through this 15-minute video. I'm going to flip ahead. Here's the exact screens that you see when you start up the A+ exam. Here is what you will see when you're looking at the candidate agreement. It even shows you what you have to click on the screen. You'll see the next buttons. It'd be nice if I did a full screen for you so you could actually see this. What the next buttons look like. Here's how you start the exam, what you can expect. Here's what the questions look like when you are taking the exam. This is a very nice overview. It tells you here's a flag for review, so you can review it when you're over. They go through the process of understanding when you click the next button, when you click the previous button, and they give you some examples of these things. More importantly, they give you an example of performance-based questions that you might run into during the exam. Here, for instance, is one of the simulation exams. You go simulation questions that you've gone through, and if you I'm going to flip ahead just a little bit. Here's a performance-based question where you have to mix and match. A lot of people think performance-based means I'm doing hands-on at the command line. Not necessarily. You may be asked questions that put things in order, or they ask you questions about this exhibit, and then you have to answer questions or perhaps multiple questions about what you see in the exhibit. So pretty important to have that there. No, that's not a chat room's like, is that a robot? Is that an automated voice? Nope, that's a real person.
On many of CompTIA's exams, the candidate will encounter a short survey at the end of the exam.
He spent a lot of time writing that script. It's so much easier just to talk off the cuff. I don't have to write a script. My very first training videos that I ever did was for InMap, and I wrote a script, and everything was scripted, and I had a spokesperson. Mrs. Professor Messer was our spokesperson on the InMap. You never even saw me on the InMap course. She was much better to look at, I assure you. And I had to write the entire script because she's in healthcare. She knows nothing about computers. So she's talking about ARP scans and understanding SYNAC, handshakes on the network. It was fantastic. So CompTIA Candidate Experience. Search for CompTIA Candidate Experience on YouTube. That'll be the place you go to be able to see those things. Another question came in from Josh. Before we go to Josh, nope, we don't have that caller. He dropped off. Call back, though, if you'd like to answer that. We are taking your calls. This is a live show, so feel free to do that. We have another question that came in from Josh. Does CompTIA throw in questions outside the scope of the A+ test that you may have no idea about? And the quick answer to this is they absolutely will. But the other part of the answer is that you're not graded on those questions, but you don't know that when you're taking the exam. There's not a message that pops up and says, you will not be graded on this question, but I'm going to ask you something about Windows 8, because you might get a Windows 8 question on your exam. This is how it worked on the 700 series. Now, CompTIA went through the process of, on the 700 series, Windows 7 was not part of the exam when the 700 series was first released. It was about a year later when CompTIA added questions about Windows 7. IPv6 was added later. So one of the things that they did when you were taking your exam is they'd ask you a question about Windows 7 to see what the responses would be like. For some reason, they do this. They try to get an understanding of how much people might know without actually preparing. I'm not sure how valid that is or what use it is, but somebody there thinks it's really, really important to do this. So it's entirely possible that in taking your A+ certification exam, you're in your 802 exam, they're asking you questions about XP, they're asking you about Vista, they're asking you about Windows 7, and then you'll get a question about Windows 8, which of course is not in the exam objectives, at least not at the current moment. Always check your exam objectives because they can change at any time. And of course, months later, the exam objectives did change. The exam number did not. It was still the 702 exam. It just now had Windows 7 on it. So I expect maybe the same thing will happen, that we now have no Windows 8 and suddenly you'll start getting Windows 8 questions, and then months later, Windows 8 becomes an actual part of the certification exam. So don't be thrown by that. You can always get questions that are outside the scope. And if you look at the exam objectives, they'll even tell you, we try to give you these exam objectives so you'll stay as close as possible to the exam, but we could always ask you anything, and we can grade you on anything. They could grade you on those Windows 8 questions. That wouldn't be very fair, though, would it? And they don't generally do that. They usually stay very, very close to the exam objectives, so you're not thrown too much when you're taking the exam. And a question from VC says, what's the best way to memorize all the information? And I say immerse yourself in it. Get a good book. Watch all of the videos. Get something that you can use to help study that content. Take some notes. Look through my study guides. You've got a huge resource available directly from CompTIA, though, and that is their exam objectives. The exam objectives, download them, read through them, use them as a checklist, use them in conjunction with your book. Your books also have the exam objectives, but of course, it's going to be only exam objectives up to the point the book was written. So I highly recommend you go out to CompTIA's website, which we are going to do right now. We're going to go out to, not on that camera, we're not. We're going to go on this camera. There we go. To the CompTIA website. And they even tell you that thing that flashed by Let's go back to that. All versions of CompTIA A+ 701, 702 will expire on December 31st. Really, they will retire, not expire. It's a bad word. Bad CompTIA. They will retire. The exams will retire on December 31st. Obviously, the English-speaking 701, 702 are already retired. Worldwide, the 701, 702 will retire. So if you're watching this and you understand English and you're taking your exam in Spanish, that exam will go away. You'll have to take the 800 series at the beginning of the year. When you're here, though, there's an entire section at the top for certification. You kind of see it behind my head there. And under the certification area, you can go to Get Certified, and it shows you all of the exam types. And we're, of course, interested in the A+. Or if you're like me, you just go to Google and you type CompTIA A+ exam objectives, and it takes you to a page like this. And right at the top, they say you can view exam objectives or view sample questions. They have sample questions on the CompTIA website. The exam objectives is what we would like. We can put in our information. You can send me a message directly. See, I'm going to put that email right there for you. So just send me an email directly, and I plan on taking, I've already selected the A+ because it selects that one for you automatically, but you could select others in here as well. And when you get the exam objectives, you can see all of them are here. The 801, 802 for Latin American Spanish and Arabic has already been created. I want the ones obviously for English. Make sure you download those, look through them. Huge amounts of data on here. Look at all of the information that you have just for PC hardware. Here's everything you need to know. Flip, flip, flip. I'm going to just keep scrolling down. 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages. We're not even through the first section. Finally, into section 2. So I keep scrolling down. Scroll, scroll, scroll. So finally, 12 pages later, we're finally through all of the exam content. This is a fantastic checklist. If you're planning to take your exam, you're planning to sit down, you're ready, you want to know, do I know everything? Go to your checklist. Go flip through all of this. Do I know how to, let's flip up to, just go to section. Okay. Do I understand the special function keys of laptop features and how it works with dual displays, how it works with wireless, how it works with volume settings, screen brightness, Bluetooth, keyboard? Oh, yep. Okay. Click. I'm going to check that one. Let's go to the next one. Do I understand the difference between a docking station and a port replicator? Yes. Okay. Let's keep going. Do I understand the physical laptop lock and cable lock? No. How's that work? So now you can test yourself to see, do you know these particular items? Going to be very, very useful to be able to do that. Always get a good book. Always go through every resource you have available. Get some good questions to go through. There are good books that have good questions. There's online resources for good questions. Very, very, very useful to have that there. Obviously, no single resource is going to have everything that you need to know. You need to use multiple resources to be able to do that. And one of the questions that came in also this month was from LS, who said, what do you think of A+ boot camps? You ever see these? These are these 5-day training sessions for A+, for 801 and 802. And as you can imagine, right off the bat, that's a lot of content for 5 days of classroom training. And that's why I think they call them boot camps, because you're in there and they are cramming that information into you. Drop and give me 20. We're going to run through this very, very quickly. This is something that can be useful, but you really need to have studied prior to going in. If you go into boot camp and you've never done a push-up before, it's going to be a big problem for you. But if you can already do some push-ups, you already can drop and do 100 real quick, you're going to be fine, at least on that part of the boot camp. So the more you prepare going into a 5-day dedicated, focused session on your A+ topics, the better off you're going to be on the outside of those 5 days. If you know nothing about any content related to the A+ certification and you walk into a boot camp, it's wasted time and it's wasted money, because you're going to get so much information at once that you're not going to be able to grasp the details of everything that's there. You'll get some information, obviously, but afterwards you're going to have to do a lot more studying to figure out the gaps that you missed when you went through those pieces. So I like the idea of a boot camp as a final sanity check. You want somebody who's really in a classroom setting where you can ask questions. There's real equipment there. You can plug things in and unplug things, or maybe it's done over the web and you're going through a detailed view of all the topics you need to know. Great. That's not a bad thing, but it's very specific. It's not a replacement for really sitting down with the topics. Generally, it takes weeks, sometimes months, to be able to study for all of the topics associated with the A+ exam. So if you are someone who is watching this video for CompTIA CE credits, that'll be our second and final for this particular one is boot camps. Send me that in an email. So now you have 2 keywords for this particular one to send that in. Well, I have a question for you. Now that we're getting to the end of our hour, I want to know from you what topics I should cover next time on the A+ certification. I think I got these numbers right. So let's see if I really did in this view. If you go to vot.rs, let's see if I'm able to get to my Mentimeter. Not getting there for some reason. There we go. 889224 is vot.rs. What A+ topic would you like to cover next time on this? This gives me an opportunity to know from you the types of things you want to do, and gives me an opportunity to know what I need to work on over the next month to put together these. As you can tell, there's a lot of work that goes into building out what we do for these study groups. And I want to be sure if we're going through the process of going through and learning all of these things, I want to be sure that I really focus on what you want to know. So if you go to vot.rs 889224, or if I click, the QR code went away pretty quick, didn't it? There's a QR code for you. For my QR code folks. Folks in the chat room already said, hey, I can use this QR code reader finally. Finally, a useful topic for QR code. I've got this set up as a word cloud on the screen, but you can see there is I will be able to go through and look at the exact data that you're sending through. Of course, it doesn't have to be here. If there's any topic that you'd like to cover on the A+ certification in our study groups, you can always send me an email directly at james@professormesser.com. You can click the Contact Us link at the top of the Professor Messer page, which is really contact me. There's no us. Looking around. Where is everybody? It's me. A lot of people said troubleshooting. This is a word cloud that's being built based on the information that you're sending in. So obviously, command is another big topic that seems to be coming in. Okay, these are good. We're going to have to do some more command line troubleshooting things on the next study group, aren't we? Nice mix of those. Hardware is another big one that's coming up. It's a little bit of networking I see thrown in there. iOS and Android. We really didn't do much on this one. I sent out some pop quiz questions this month that had iOS and Android topics associated with it. And somebody sent me a message and said, why are you asking us about iOS and Android for the A+? Because it's on your A+ certification exam topics, those exam objectives. There's a lot you have to know now about mobile devices and how to keep those connected, how to grab mail, how to configure a mobile device to grab the mail from Exchange. How do you configure a mobile device to grab the mail from Google Mail? How do you grab it from any of your ISPs? That is one place that becomes incredibly important when you start stepping through those pieces. I think it's another way that you could always go in and read those objectives and really understand. There should never be a question about whether certain topics are available or something you might need to know for your A+ certification exam. Well, as you are going over the next month, we're getting into the new year. There's a lot that you're going to have to learn for A+. You're planning to take your exam. You may want to visit our website or at least keep track of what we're doing here at Professor Messer. You can go to professormesser.com/Twitter. You can also follow us and keep track of what we're doing on YouTube. Those YouTube subscriptions become incredibly important for what we do here. It's nice to have the folks at YouTube look over and say, hey, there's a lot of people watching these videos and they like them. Always thumbs up if you like one of those videos. Of course, I have those quick reference guides. If you'd like to give back to the Professor Messer website, this is a great way to do it and relatively inexpensive way. And you get a really nice study guide out of it at professormesser.com/A+SG. I also have links on the drop-down menus and other places on the website. Of course, GTS Learning, another great sponsor of what we do here with their live labs you can find at professormesser.com/fast track. And there's also the live labs link that I have at the bottom of the video page available there. And of course, we do these every month. If you'd like to see when the next A+ or Network Plus study group is, I usually arrange them a few weeks in advance. So I'll have the January dates up shortly, and you can always find those at professormesser.com/calendar. But of course, I couldn't do any of this without you. I really do appreciate you sending in all of your questions, all of the things that you want to know about. It gives us a really great bit of information to go through and understand the things that are going to help you when it comes time for you to take your A+ certification exam. Well, that's it for our final A+ study group of the year for December 2013. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Professor Messer A+ study group.